Hi everyone, I'm Steven Sigman.
And I'm Mike Messinio.
And this is the weekly movie Throwdown, where each week we take two films with something in common and talk through which one is better. This week we're looking at two films from the director Jeremy Saulnier. From 2013, it's Blue Ruin, one of his first films, going up against 2024's Rebel Ridge, which was a Netflix film, much bigger in scope. I think it's going to be an interesting comparison of filmmaker at the beginning and then later in his career. Before we get into that, any wins of the week for us, Mike?
I think I have a win of the week. I finally saw If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, which I hadn't seen before. And that was a really powerful movie. I don't really have a lot to say about it because it just kind of sits with you, and it was a lot. Yeah. Rose Byrne definitely got a well-deserved Oscar nomination. It was a really great performance, but the whole movie just felt small yet weighty, I guess is the best way that I could say it. And I put it on because I just figured I would throw it on and watch it for a few minutes and get the vibe of it, and then probably go back to it. But once I put it on, I got really drawn into it. It really stayed with me as I was watching it. So wow, I thought it was pretty excellent.
That's the opposite feeling I had. I really enjoyed it, but I could only watch it in little bits. It took me like 2 weeks to watch it because it's just so like dread filled and
it's
dark.
It's very painful. But yeah, it's relatable in some ways. I mean, it's obviously outlandish, but yeah, for something that's that out there, it really struck a chord with me, I have to say.
Yeah. Very interesting film.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, are we going to talk about the Odyssey of it all? I didn't know if we were going to discuss that.
Yeah. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I did. I figured.
I haven't seen it.
Actually, I haven't seen it yet. Okay.
I can't get tickets.
Because you're going to wait. You want to watch the big, try and get the IMAX?
I do want to get IMAX, but even here in New Jersey, where it's like AMC IMAX, it's very hard to find seats other than like front row at the IMAX or one of the Paramus Mall where I go to see some of my films. They actually have a 70 millimeter screening, which I don't know if they installed like a 70 millimeter projector or something, but it's a new feature for the Odyssey. So I might try to see it that way. I do want to see it at Lincoln Plaza, but
yeah, that's
good luck.
I actually saw a 70 millimeter screening at my local theater, which was fun. And I have to say, like, I sat close to the back and I got to hear the projector whirring.
They're loud.
Which I kind of forgot how much I missed. I just kind of loved it. I just kind of loved sitting there and listening to it. Some of us feel that way, I guess, but I really enjoyed that part of it. So we don't really have to talk about it. I'll just say it had me thinking. It coincides with New York Magazine releasing a list of the most important directors around right now. And I was thinking about that. I was talking to my wife about it, where, it's true. Since we talked about Spielberg a couple of weeks ago and how Spielberg is just kind of, his star has waned, really. I mean, his time has passed in some ways. And that's fine. I mean, he had a 50-year run, so, no problem there. But, with Spielberg gone, the truth is that Nolan really is in a class by himself at this point. I mean, he's really the only director who, on name alone, can open a huge movie. Now, I know we can argue all the little things, so we could say, I mean, obviously we love Scorsese, and we love Tarantino, we love Paul Thomas Anderson, but those guys open movies to specific people. They have their audiences. But Nolan's name opens movies wide to people who are just casual moviegoers. And that's the difference. And I think that that's really what puts him in a class by himself. I mean, we're going to see what the next Greta Gerwig movie does, and we'll see where she stands. I mean, Zach Kreger is going to release another movie in in a little while. And maybe those people will get there. I don't know. But right now, it just really feels that there's Nolan and then there's everybody else.
I agree with you completely. I've really stayed off the internet. I've just been super busy, so I don't have time to do much of anything. But everything I see about the Odyssey is 5 stars. Like I haven't seen a bad word about it. other than the people, like the inevitable culture wars where people want to ban it. And I don't even know like the depths of that because I didn't pay attention.
We'll just say all of that is dumb and kind of nonsense.
I figured.
You watch the movie as the filmmaker makes the movie. Does it take a few? I mean, Nolan makes the movie his own, but you want a filmmaker to interpret any work as their own. And of course, it's like, how do you argue about casting for a fictional story? The Odyssey was not real, so
yeah.
what are we arguing about? If it was historical figures, that's different, but these aren't historical figures. These are characters. So it's just ridiculous on its face.
Yeah.
So there's no point in wasting time with any of that.
You have some Homer truthers out there who really wanted to be accurate to what he wrote, I guess. But I think you're right in that he seems like the most populist auteur that we have.
Right. That's the word. That's the word.
And it's really interesting. And I think it's been that way since The Dark Knight, really, or maybe even Inception. I don't remember which one came out first, but those two films showed such a unique perspective on something that is just so widely received. And I think that's just so interesting. We really don't have that. You're right. I don't know who else could pull that off. And the fact that so much of it is practical, I think, is such a throwback to earlier filmmaking that maybe is becoming more in vogue now as we're almost reaching like a post VFX era where you see a lot more people working that way. So yeah, I don't know. He's like the right guy for the right moment, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. So
it's amazing.
So I mean, after you see it, we'll talk about it. But yeah, just the fact that he's putting movies on film, doing the 70mm thing. I mean, he is someone who's trying to preserve movies as they are, but also moving things forward to more people. And when you watch the Odyssey, Nolan has a very recognizable style now in a way, and this follows that. His storytelling, but it very much works for the Odyssey.
I'm really looking forward to it. I don't have 3 hours right now to dedicate to it, and it's hard to find tickets anyway. So, but maybe we do a throwdown between the Odyssey and Oh Brother Where Art Thou when it's ready.
You consider
we'll
that.
See.
My brother told me that he was watching a version of the Odyssey. It was an Italian version that Kirk Douglas was in, like in the 50s, and it was Italian. So Kirk Douglas is actually dubbed in Italian. I've never seen this version. Part of me kind of wants to watch that now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I would like to see that as well. Do you have any other wins that you want to mention?
No, that was it.
Okay. I have two things this week. Speaking of Italian, these are both releases from Radiance Films that came out this week on Blu-ray. And the first one for our fans at home is something called The Double. And this is a film by Romolo Guerrieri from 1971. It is Italian, so it's in Italian. There's an English dub on it. Radiance Films, by the way, is this Blu-ray label that I'm just absolutely in love with. I talked a few months ago about a film I got from them called The Ogre of Athens from like 1955 in Greece. And that's the kind of stuff they put out. It's this underseen, really underappreciated kind of cult genre stuff. And The Double is very much that. It's about a guy who at the beginning of the film is shot in an underground parking lot. And then the rest of the film is like flashbacks of his life that kind of give you clues as to how this incident happened. And it's like dreamy with like really weird cutting. This guy has a 19-year-old wife who's very flirty with everyone and he can't control her. So he's kind of a jerk. He's in love with her mother. And and then there's a drifter involved. It's very weird. It's very genre and Italian. And just a lot of fun. And it came out this week. The other film is from Shuji Terayama. It's called The Boxer. And this is from 1977 in Japan. And what's really interesting about this is it's put out by Radiance, but the original company is a company called Toei Company. And basically what happened, there's a documentary on the disc about it. in the 70s, it's much like America in a way, where the big studio films were kind of failing and the Japanese box office was really in flux. And Toei was kind of an animation studio in the 60s, and they pivoted to do like Yakuza films and a lot of genre stuff, something they called Pinky Violence, which was like female Yakuza. Just really, really interesting stuff, kind of throwing it at the wall to see what sticks in the 70s. And then by 1977, when this comes out, they leaned into basically creating Japanese ripoffs of American blockbusters. So they had a film that's kind of like the Japanese Exorcist. They had the Japanese Jaws. And you can guess what The Boxer is a spoof of in 1977. It's really kind of calling upon Rocky for its story. But this is the year that just tanked Toei Company completely. And in fact, the documentary and the special features is called The Year Toei Died, or The Year Toei Failed, or something. But it's Rocky coded, but it's not the same story. It's about a boxer who's kind of past his prime, who left boxing and is kind of on the skids now. And he finds this young boxer with a disability and starts to train him when nobody really has hope in him, and helps him to come up the ranks and become a professional fighter. So there's some heart in it, but it's still like a Japanese genre film from the 70s that's inspired by Rocky, and just a lot of fun. But the big win for me was finding out about Toei Company, which I had never heard of. But the sense I get from them is that they're the Japanese canon films, like basically the same kinds of movies that you and I saw in the 80s, but in 70s Japan. So I'm really excited to do a deep dive on them and kind of learn more about some of the stuff they did and watch a lot of these crazy action films. They also delved into porn a little bit in the early 70s, like
was the 70s
mainstream porn. So that's part of their story as well. So it's just a really fascinating new thing that I learned about. And Radiance Films is just unbelievable. Everything they put out, I'm so excited about it. So I look forward to everything they do. But I watched both of those this week and really, really had a good time with them. So those are my wins of the week. And with that, why don't we get into what we're talking about this week, which is Blue Ruin versus Rebel Ridge. What are your initial thoughts on this? But I know you hadn't seen Blue Ruin, but you did see Rebel Ridge and liked it a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And so I lied last week because it turns out I'd seen Green Room as well. I just wasn't aware that that was the same director. So that was surprising to find out.
Right.
But yeah, Rebel Ridge, I think we talked about it briefly in the past. It really was a great surprise for me last year. Probably one of my favorite movies that came out last year. Blue Ruin, yeah, I hadn't seen it before, and it's really nice as a companion. You know, once if you like Rebel Ridge, it's nice to go back and see Saulnier's earlier work and really see what a good filmmaker he really is. I mean, that's what I take from it. I mean, when you go back and look at that, because you're talking about all the buzz right now is about Obsession, which was made for about $1 million. And how successful it is. And I don't really care about success in terms of box office, but I mean, it is a big deal, of course, for the filmmaker, but it's what you put on the screen versus what you were working with. And for $1 million, that was a very effective movie. And you look at something like Blue Ruin, and that was made for half the amount of Obsession. And it's just an excellent film. It's just a really well-made film. You would never imagine that it was made for, you know, less than your average home, or at least your average home around here anyway. But
yeah. Yeah, it's really a revelation, I think. And that's, the obvious comparison would be First Blood with Rebel Ridge. And I know you're the arbiter of Stallone on the show, so I didn't want to cross that line. That's up to you.
No, I would love to discuss that. Actually, you're 100% right. And what I think is great about Rebel Ridge is that it sets all of that up and then subverts it, which is really what makes it something interesting. And I think these are good companion films because what Blue Ruin is it's very much like a pulpy genre movie. It feels very much like a B movie in ways, but it's very violent. And the thing about Rebel Ridge is that you keep anticipating violence and it keeps subverting your expectation of violence. And so you have two very different movies in that regard. And it shows what a good filmmaker he is in that regard, because he's not just a one trick pony. He's not just trying to make movies that are one note in terms of gore and things like that. You know, Rebel Ridge shows that he's more of a complete filmmaker, that he can subvert your expectations.
I think you're right about that, but I also think there's a through line in all of his work, that what he does as a filmmaker. And yeah, Rebel Ridge is so interesting because it's like it's contained. It's like restricted in a way, and that I almost think these two films represent Jeremy Saulnier in a sense, where I think we'll get into it more, but Blue Ruin is like basically the story of this guy who plans, who lives off minimal means and then does the best he can with what he has. And turns out it doesn't really take into account a lot of the things that happen. And he doesn't, it's impossible for him to psychologically prepare, as smart as he is. And we get the sense that he's very smart at the beginning. And that almost feels like a first time filmmaker to me. I know this is his second film, but you think about somebody who plans a film, and then this was raised, Kickstarter, raised money for this film. So it's a little less, it's a little more like reactionary, I think, going into the film business. Whereas Rebel Ridge is more controlled. There's a bigger budget. It's very maintained. You know that the Terry character knows what he's doing at this point. So it almost feels like those are kind of Jeremy Saulnier's experiences at these moments in his life. The other thing I wanted to talk about, before I do, which one is your favorite going into the conversation?
Rebel Ridge was my favorite going into the conversation.
Okay. I don't know at this point. I'm hoping this conversation will shed some light on it, because to me, I can't pick a winner. I really like them both for different reasons. So we're going to have to get there by the end. I just can't choose going in. But one thing I wanted to mention is that Blue Ruin came out in 2013. And this, in my mind, is such a critical year for independent film and what bigger budget films would be going forward. I just want to read a couple of the things that were released this year that feel so important to me. You have The Spectacular Now, which is directed by James Ponsoldt, and he went on to direct The End of the Tour, the David Foster Wallace story. The Circle with Tom Hanks and Emma Watson. That didn't do very well, but it was based on a book by Dave Eggers, my favorite author, so I have to mention it. And then Ponsoldt went on to direct stuff like Master of None and Shrinking and Shameless. So this is a guy who, one of his first films, in 2013 led to this career. And you also have Short Term 12, which is one of my favorite films from that year, directed by Dustin Daniel Cretton. And he's directing the new Spider-Man film. Like, that's where he's gone from that. And by the way, that's the film, Short Term 12, that Brie Larson should have won an Oscar for. She's absolutely lights out in that. You have Kings of Summer with Jordan Vogt Roberts, and he went on to direct Kong Skull Island, did a bunch of episodes of You're the Worst, which is a pretty highly acclaimed show on FX. Fruitvale Station from Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan. I mean, we know where they went. Mud from Jeff Nichols, which is a big part of The Reconnaissance, and Jeff Nichols went on to have a really solid career. Before Midnight, Richard Linklater, Stories We Tell, the documentary from Sarah Polley, that is absolutely fantastic. Frances Ha, which is kind of what introduced most people to Greta Gerwig. Nebraska, Under the Skin, one of my favorite films of all time from Jonathan Glazer. So this is an incredible year of independent cinema that you see a lot of people graduating from that class and moving into bigger stuff. And I just think it's such a tipping point for all, like, this whole class of people that I just find really interesting. And Blue Ruin is part of it. And we see where Jeremy Saulnier goes from that year. So just something that I noticed that I think is pretty compelling. I don't know what it is about that year, but great for independent film. Yeah, so let's just talk about Blue Ruin then.
Yeah.
It's from 2013, as I said. Saulnier wrote and directed it. He's also the cinematographer on it, which is amazing because it looks incredible for a film of that budget. And as I said, this was a Kickstarter funded film, and they raised $420,000 for it. Mind blowing. I think about, I know you haven't seen it, but there's a film called Primer from 2004, directed by Shane Carruth, and it's famously $6,000 for the budget, but it won Sundance. Like it beat out Napoleon Dynamite and Garden State. And you can see in that film, like what a good filmmaker can do with a short budget. And this is another example of that. I mean, I think about like Obsession, like you said. I mean, there's more to that, you know, because it's a bigger budget, but what he's doing here with under $500,000, like Black Swan, we just talked about a few weeks ago, that had like a $13 million budget. And I don't see too much in that blows me away in a way that isn't comparable to Blue Ruin for under $1 million. It's just really, really good.
I agree. And as we've talked in the past, it's like, well, you know, what's a good place for a filmmaker to start? Kind of, you know, filming what you know, being in a place that's familiar to you. And this again proves that. I didn't even know this. I mean, the story of Blue Ruin is fascinating, where, you know, they had made a movie together. We're talking about Saulnier and his best friend, Macon Blair. So they had made Murder Party before that, and they thought it was going to be a success, and it wasn't. And they were essentially realizing that this may not work for either of them. And so Blue Ruin comes about as almost like a last hurrah before they have to join the real world. And they want to make this movie that they, you know, just their last movie together and make it as good as they can. And so the story is just kind of wonderful. And because the budget's so small, the house in the movie ends up being, you know, the director's parents' home. And that car is actually his parents' car. And they mess with it a little bit, but that all these things, they were just using what they found. And they had spent time in Delaware. So obviously the beginning takes place at Rehoboth Beach, I think it was, where they had spent summers. So it's just him kind of leaning on what's familiar to him and crafting a story in places he knew well and was able to film beautifully and feel comfortable working in. And that's just a great way to go about making a first film.
Yeah.
Or second film, so to speak, in this regard.
Right. You do what you know. And I think that familiarity with the setting makes it so much easier to feel comfortable doing it. So it makes perfect sense. And we have so many films that we've covered that are the same way. So, you know, you write what you know. But this is interesting because it won the Fupresci Award at Directors Fortnight, which is part of Cannes, or it's kind of adjacent to Cannes. So it's a film critic award for what they call, I forget what they call it, but it's something about like just quality filmmaking for a small budget.
And I think this was after it had gotten rejected, right? It got rejected from Sundance, I think. That they had submitted it there, assuming that's where it would get in, and it actually got rejected. Then it got admitted to Cannes, which is just a crazy thing to hear, right?
Yeah, you never know. I mean, you just have to submit to all of those festivals. But let me before we go too deep, just read the overview so that people know what we're talking about here. It's a mysterious outsider's quiet life is turned upside down when he returns to his childhood home to carry out an act of vengeance. Proving himself an amateur assassin, he winds up in a brutal fight to protect his estranged family. That's small, but such a good summary of what it is, because you know, you open with this guy living as light as he can, like a Spartan existence. You don't know anything about him. He's disheveled, hasn't cut his hair in years, it looks like. He lives in his car. But you quickly learn that he's very smart, and he's seemingly leading up to something. And I think what's interesting is that the thing that sets it off is the murder that you would think the whole film is going to lead up to. You know, like that's his whole goal. And then he does it very early on and botches it. And then from there, your expectation is that this is going to be a film where this guy is going to hunt down for revenge this guy who murdered his parents. And it ends up that he does it quickly on, but is kind of incompetent at it, and then goes all the way forward, basically being hunter to hunted. And I just find that such a fascinating way to tell the story.
I was going to say it's another idea of subverting your expectations, right? And I said, like Rebel Words, I think he's very good at that, where you have in your mind these tropes of how you think movies are supposed to go. But yeah, he gives that to you immediately, and then the rest of the movie is just aftermath and fallout, which is definitely not what you're expecting.
It's so interesting because you root for him, but he's kind of an anti-hero in a way, but there's no way, as smart as this guy is, we see him reading books. We know he took I say reading books like that, it equates to a genius, but, we see him reading a book, and that's in his car with a flashlight, and that kind of sets in your mind that he's a smart guy. We know that he took the car battery out to preserve it. That's another smart thing. So you get the sense that he's really planning something, but there's just, I think the point is there's no accounting for the psychological effect of taking a life. And that's what he sort of wrestles with all the way throughout. And it basically makes him kind of, I don't know, passive in a way. Like he doesn't necessarily know how to handle what he's done and the repercussions of it.
Yeah. I mean, this is the one thing the only, not a negative thing, but as I was watching the movie, you said that it sets up that he's kind of waiting for something, but was he expecting his parents' murderer to be released because he seemed surprised by this? But my question is, if he wasn't waiting for that, what was he waiting for? Like it seems that he was so traumatized by what happened that he just kind of drops off the grid completely, abruptly, which is a strange way to handle grief. I don't know. But the question is, would he have just lived that existence forever if he wasn't spurred into action by hearing that his parents' murderer was released from jail?
It's a good question. And I got the sense that he knew it was going to happen at some point, but maybe he didn't know when. So when it finally came to pass, he was, understandably taken aback by it, because you're just waiting and waiting. And then it's like a call to action. I do think there's some script stuff with this that maybe isn't as solid as it could be to establish some of that stuff, but it's just so interesting in the way that he's completely unprepared in his preparation for this, which when we compare the two is like the exact opposite of the Terry character.
True.
In Rebel Ridge.
But that's in a way what makes this movie interesting to watch, where you're not used to seeing someone who's not very good at stuff carry out vengeance in this way. I mean, even going back to something like Death Wish, where the idea is that character was to be a mild-mannered architect or whatever it was, and then he's spurred to be an angel of vengeance, so to speak.
Yeah.
But once he gets into it, he's really good at it, right? It's almost like from the get-go,
Yeah.
he seemed really good at murder. So we're used to that, where someone just instantly clicks into being an Avenger. Whereas in this case, yeah, he never feels comfortable with it, doesn't seem great at it, and that feels much more relatable. I love the scene where he's trying to take the arrow out of his leg. It's like, think about everything we've seen in movies where it's like, well, you have this injury, you go to the drugstore, you get all this stuff, and then you fix it yourself, you sew it up, and you're good to go, right? That's how it works. This is how movies work. But yes, in reality, you try to pull it out, there's so much blood, and you pass out, because that's kind of what real life is like. And I appreciate those little things where, again, you an action hero would do X, but a real person would actually exist in this way. You're not quite as tough as you think you are. And that was actually my favorite scene, because you're just expecting he's gonna take it out like Rambo. He's gonna burn the ends off so it cauterizes. He might sew it, whatever, and he's gonna move on. No, not really.
I kept thinking about the way the violence is handled in this. It's very matter of fact. And if there's anything that I have as like a negative about this is a little bit of detachment, because because he's an everyman, and it almost feels like he's in shock the whole time because he doesn't know what he's doing. He's not good at it. And once he kills the Wade character, it's like he just well, I guess even before that, he's a little unsure of himself. In theory, he has this whole plan, but in action, he's just not equipped for it. But what I find so interesting about it is that the violence is so matter of fact. And I find myself going back to S. Craig Zahler, who directed Bone Tomahawk and Dragged Across Concrete.
That is amazing that you brought him up, because I was going to bring him up later, but that's fine.
Oh. But well, he feels more appropriate to this film than Rebel Ridge, I think, because there's this like matter of factness about the violence that is inherent in all of his films, and that's the feeling that you get when you see Dwight going through these motions in Blue Ruin. What were you going to say about him?
Well, I was going to say, when we're talking about Rebel Ridge, I was going to bring up, it's part of like a Don Johnson renaissance almost. That he's had just a wonderful post Nash Bridges career of picking interesting roles, and part of that is being involved with good directors like S. Craig Zahler. He was in 2 of his movies, so I think that was just kind of the start of him getting involved in interesting projects and really finding good roles for himself later in his career. So I was going to bring him up later in that regard.
Oh, that's so funny. I didn't even think about the Don Johnson connection, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Huh. But yeah, that's the people talk about Bone Tomahawk in particular and how there's just no like fanfare, for lack of a better word, around the violence. And you see that a lot here because it's so matter of fact. And even at the end, when, you have what's essentially like a standoff between a bunch of people with guns, it feels climactic, but not, I'm not sure how to describe it. It doesn't, there's no Hollywood to it. It's like people just get shot and die.
Well, I was going to say, as opposed to the standoff at the end of Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
Which is very much a standoff influenced by movies, for movies,
right.
Whereas this one, it just feels like a matter of fact, real life kind of situation, how it would be bungled or handled in reality.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe there's like a realism to it.
Although in reality, who the hell hides a automatic machine gun under a recliner? I didn't not expect that.
That's a bad hombre who does that.
I'm telling you, that is something.
Jesus, you would think he would have looked there. I mean, he collected like 50 guns from their house.
I mean, who would think you would hide something under the rest? I mean, I would not have checked there either. That's usually where the remote gets lost. That's not where you hide your machine guns.
It's like machine guns and a bunch of pocket change down there that went missing. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk about Macon Blair, who plays Dwight. He's the lead character, very much like a consistent collaborator with Jeremy Saulnier, and I really think he's perfect for this role because he's very unassuming, and you really believe him as somebody who's probably not good at this. Whereas in other cases of films like this, somebody's cast who you might have a little bit of a hard time believing that they're this unassuming or that they're this like incompetent, but he's so perfect for it, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that the reason he's perfect at it is because in most cases, as we said in this regard in other movies, someone would start out incompetent, but they gain competence and by the end of the movie, you have this assured person who's ready to kick ass and take names, right? It always ends up in that regard. Whereas in this, he never gets there. Like, it never actually gets better. He just kind of keeps bungling his way through things until inevitably, we get to the end of it. But so that is why he's really well cast, because he never has to assume any kind of macho posturing. And he admittedly said that when he first heard what the movie was going to be about, he thought he was going to be not the right person for the role because he thought he was going to have to be more of an action guy. But once he read the script, he realized that no, this is actually perfect for him.
It's almost like a reverse hero's journey in a way. You know, in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, you're called to action, you fight the dragon, and you come out triumphant. But here it's like he goes from being triumphant in his mind, essentially, to like being called to action and totally screwing everything up. So it's
true.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that approach to it. But that just shows what a good writer Jeremy Saulnier is, and he just continues that throughout his career. He actually directed 2 episodes of True Detective too, which feels like the most natural, you know, next step for someone who made Blue Ruin before they get to Rebel Ridge.
Yeah,
it's so perfect. And you mentioned Green Room too, which is like kind of a really highly regarded film in like cinephile circles. People really love that film, and with good reason. I mean, that in particular feels also like a nice middle ground between Blue Ruin and Rebel Ridge, because it carries that violence over, but it feels a little more produced, a little bigger, not much bigger, but a little bigger, has stars in it. So that's also like a nice middle ground and a great way to look at his trajectory.
Yeah, it's a great evolution of growing into filmmaking. And we've talked about this before. There's filmmakers who get there and filmmakers that don't. And your second and third movies usually tell the tale of whether or not you're going to be able to gain the momentum to eventually get to higher budget movies.
And this is his second film, so it's you know, the proof is right there. Not a lot of other characters in it. I guess it's very straightforward, very focused on the Dwight character. There is his sister, who's played by Amy Hargreaves, and then there's the other character whose name I'm forgetting, but he's played by Devin Rattray.
Ben?
Ben, that's it, I think. Regardless, he did you recognize him?
Oh, I didn't recognize.
It's Buzz from Home Alone, the older brother.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Holy cow. I had no idea.
Think about it now. You can see it if you know.
That's totally true. Clearly... And a weird thing is, you could almost imagine Buzz becoming that, like a hermit with a bunch of guns in a cabinet. That is something. Wow. That's like our second Home Alone reference in like 3 weeks.
Right. Yeah, the old man was the other one. What was he in? I can't remember.
Close Encounters.
That's right. Yeah, wow. We're really having a Home Alone month here on the show. At the end, speaking of the characters, the family comes in where the standoff begins, and the older sister is Eve Plum, who played Jan on the Brady Bunch. What an interesting cameo.
Yeah.
And what else you want to talk about with this?
I just think it's a really good piece of filmmaking from a young filmmaker. You can really see the promise in this movie. You know, the violence might be a little much for certain people, but it feels necessary. And sometimes it's good to see movies that depict things a little more realistic than the hyper stylized stuff that we're used to seeing. So I always think about that in regards of showing like action movies to my kids and things. It's like you get this idea, like my son, after watching, you know, some Jason Statham movies, like literally thinks that you can just walk into a room and, you know, shake bullets and like knock someone out with a punch. And it's like, you know, maybe we should see something a little more realistic about how things might be. So,
well, then Blue Ruin is
maybe we'll watch this in a couple of years.
List.
Not yet. It's a little soon, but I do think about it.
Yeah, I think that there's that realism to it that makes it stand out so much, in that this guy is not an unreliable narrator. He's just an incompetent narrator, and that's what makes it so compelling. So I really love the subversion of that story.
You also mentioned how he's technically the hero of the story, or the anti-hero, so to speak. I think that's the other thing that I grappled with, because I don't necessarily think that.
Okay.
And, we're following a character, anti-hero is probably the right thing, but you're thinking the whole time, it's like, well, he responds to his parents' death, which obviously is terrible, by completely abandoning everyone he's ever known and his family, and is just living completely off the grid, which is a strange choice. He hasn't spoken to these people in years. And then he's only spurred to action to come back and carry out this completely reckless act of vengeance without any real plan of how to do it. And then just creates this cascading chaos in which he puts his family in danger and then finds that he has to deal with these larger repercussions. It just feels like you say he's smart, which he may be, but he just feels like an incompetent chaos agent who just spins this top that he cannot control and ends up having to put everyone in a situation where these people are bailing him out or they're dealing with the consequences of it. Just not well handled. That's my impression the whole time, where it's like, what are you doing? Like, what's going on here?
I think that's what makes it compelling. You want to root for him because of his mission, but you also get, at least I did, very frustrated by him.
Right. And they do a good job of as you said, there aren't a ton of other characters and they're not in it for a lot of the movie, but they do a really good job of reflecting the insanity of it all back to him. Where you really get the sense of like, what the hell have you put in motion here without any foresight, and to think that there's a sister with kids involved and you drag your friend into this, who actually is a pretty good person to help you out in the way that he does. But it's like, you're dragging these people into all this, and it's like, this doesn't feel great.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess that's, I don't know, what's the moral of it? Like blind revenge. They say when you go for revenge, you dig two graves.
That's exactly. Right? I was going to say that. Was that Sun Tzu? Is that what that is?
Yeah,
I feel like
I think so.
That is as true a proverb as ever. That's really what this movie is about. Where if you just blindly go into something without thinking about the larger repercussions of it, things probably will not go the way you want.
I think that's perhaps a flaw in the script, is that he's so focused on this, and he's such a smart guy that you see him very meticulously living his life in a way that's all leading up to this, but he doesn't for a second think about his sister and her kids. He does write her a postcard, and that's the end of the film when the postcard finally arrives. But I didn't read the postcard. I don't know what was on it, but it still seems like there's no consideration for anybody else because he's so hell bent. And that, that's kind of a trope in films, is like collateral damage. And that's really, it's just so fun to break this down and look at the ways it's different from standard revenge stories. I just think it's so cool. But we should still move on to the other film this week, Rebel Ridge. And let me just tell you a quick summary of this one. A former Marine grapples his way through a web of small-town corruption when an attempt to post bail for his cousin escalates into a violent standoff with the local police chief. Man, this is something else.
Let me just say really that if you ever went to a studio and pitched a movie as First Blood mixed with an episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, people would not think that would be a good movie, nor successful necessarily. But it turns out it is a recipe for a really good movie.
I listened to an interview with Jeremy Saulnier, and he said it's First Blood meets Michael Clayton.
Is that what he said? That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone listening to this or even you saw this, but yeah, back in like 2014, John Oliver on his show Last Week Tonight did a whole episode about civil forfeiture. And that's the first time that I had heard about it. And it was maddening and just insane that this is the reality of how America works. And this is totally legal. And I found myself just being infuriated as I was watching it. And I feel like Jeremy Saulnier had to have seen that. There's just no way that this didn't spark the idea from that. But yeah, he does a really good job of laying out this little known thing that is really important to people that it happens to, but most people don't know about, and turning it into a very entertaining thriller without ever being too preachy or boring.
It's what I thought about watching it this time, and also there was a New Yorker profile around the same time of the John Oliver thing, so the two of them in concert, I think, kind of raised the awareness around this, because I read the New Yorker profile and it's like shocking. It focuses on this town in Texas that targets people with out of state plates coming through, and basically what civil asset forfeiture is, for the people who don't know, is it's been a law in various forms forever.
Yeah, going back, it was used a lot during Prohibition. It was used for the mob in a lot of, like in the 70s and 80s. It was used as a tool to kind of cripple the mob
and drug cartels
and the drug trade. Right. That's yeah.
And I don't know if you remember this, but when I was young, I would see commercials for auctions of seized drug vehicles.
Yeah.
Remember that?
100%. I always thought I was going to buy my first vehicle from a police auction. It's like, this seems like some great cars, right?
Yeah. And they're like a fraction of the price of a regular car. But all of those confiscations were based on this civil asset forfeiture, because what it does is it allows law enforcement to seize the assets of what they believed initially to be like drug cartels or the mob or any kind of criminal. But what happened is struggling police forces sort of weaponized it and took it to a level where it's completely corrupt, and most people don't know about it, but it affects a lot of people. So this town in Texas was targeting people with out of town plates, and basically they can use suspicion of a crime to enact this asset forfeiture law. And in the New Yorker profile, there was this family who were traveling through this Texas town, going to look at, like, going to a zoo or something or whatever, like a weekend trip. And they had cash because they were going to buy a new car or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the police stopped them and saw the money and basically said, look, we suspect you of trafficking drugs, because they found a bowl. And because they found that no drugs whatsoever, they said, we suspect you of trafficking drugs. You will go to jail and we will take your children. They will be in foster care until they're 18, unless you give us permission to search your car and basically give us this money. So that's what happens. These police forces are struggling, but they've weaponized this law. And that's what you see in this film, is that the struggling police force. I mean, you're almost sympathetic for Don Johnson, slightly.
Yeah, that's a great scene, because it does lay out at least an explanation for what's being done and why. I mean, of course, it never justifies what the stuff that unfolds, but yeah, it at least gives you a window into understanding like what is happening. It's not just done out of pure evil malice; that some of it's done out of survival in a way for the police departments, but it's shitty nonetheless.
Yeah, and it seems like it goes from being done for survival to just, this is what we do now, and we can buy a margarita machine for $1,000, or so it begins with somewhat good intentions, even though it's still screwing people over. But I got the feeling, like we talked about last week with Notting Hill, where Richard Curtis had this idea, like a dream around this dinner table scene, and then had to build the film out around it. You almost get the sense that Saulnier read this article or watched John Oliver and then had to build the film out around that. And I think, as much as I love it, it gets in the weeds with that a little bit in the second half, and it basically turns into this like conspiracy thriller. So I kind of lose it a little bit, and it's almost 2.5 hours, so it does feel like you could trim a little bit of it, but it still moves quickly.
I don't disagree. But I don't agree that it's a little slow at certain points, but I think it's necessary because, again, you're dealing with something that is unknown to the general public, and
Yeah.
you do have to put some breadcrumbs there. It's not an easy thing for a casual person to follow. And as an example, I always brings up a lot. I'm always thinking about watching movies with my family as I'm like, this is a good movie to watch. And I love the idea of showing this to my youngest son in some ways, because it's like an antidote to, super macho movies, because it keeps subverting your idea of what you think is going to be violent when it ends up not being that. But I really thought, like, is he really going to understand the idea of not just civil forfeiture, but how to hold people in a prison cell for long enough where the dash cam stuff doesn't, can't be used after 90 days. Like, that's a lot of high concept stuff that a person not necessarily paying attention isn't really going to understand. So it does have to slow things down and walk you through some of that, because without it, it would just really be hard to follow.
Yeah, even I was scratching my head a few times when it came to like the hard drives and the SD cards and, the lights being tripping the dash cam.
That was great,
stuff.
by the way. Like that was an excellent little piece of storytelling there of how to keep the not turn the lights on and what it triggers, and then how it comes back later. It's just a really nice piece of work.
Yeah, despite my quibble about getting in the weeds a little bit with that stuff, it's still a super solid script that moves quickly despite its 2.5 hour runtime, and much in the way I kept thinking about S. Craig Zoller when watching Blue Ruin. With this, I kept thinking about Bad Day at Black Rock. I don't know if you've ever seen that. With Spencer Tracy from 1955.
You know what? No. It was on Turner Classic Movies a few months ago, and I taped it with the expectation I was going to watch it soon, and I haven't watched it yet.
It's one of my favorite films, and directed by John Sturges. And the premise of it is like, Rebel Ridge feels a little bit like a Western to me.
Yes.
In that a stranger rolls into a small town that's virtually corrupt, stirs the pot, and then needs to be taken out because of that. And that's exactly what happens in Bad Day at Black Rock. Spencer Tracy goes to this small town to bestow a military award on this Japanese American veteran, and it turns out he's not there anymore. I won't give it away, but the town is involved because it's very racist, and what he uncovers, needs to be silenced because the town survives based on the corruption that they enact. So it very much felt like that to me, and I highly recommend everybody watch that film. It is unbelievably good, and that's the thing here is like somebody just goes in and kicks the hornet's nest, and the way of life is completely disrupted, and then you don't realize who's doing that, and then you get into this situation where, just like First Blood, right? Like that's the first blood of it, is that nobody knew Rambo was this vet and had the skills that he had.
Yeah, as I said, that is it. It's right. It's what I really liked about this movie, is because you've seen First Blood, as most people have. If you haven't, you should. You're primed to believe this is going to unfold in a certain way. And the first 45 minutes of this movie gives you exactly that. Person rolls in, gets messed with by the local police. They have no idea who they're messing with. Ass kicking is about to ensue. But just when you get to the ass kicking part, it takes a left turn into a completely different place that you are completely not expecting. And some people may hate that. I absolutely love that. Because if you want to make First Blood, you just go watch First Blood. There's no reason to make that movie again. But using that as a springboard to move into something else is just a really fun way to go about making your movie. So, and I said, what I really like about this movie, it's not just that because of previous trope you expect certain things, but you always expect the hero to kick ass. And the fact that he's completely nonviolent in a way, well, not completely nonviolent. He shreds some guy's arm pretty harshly, but overall, he doesn't kill a single person. And I really like that idea that you have a person who is just trying to get from point A to point B. Even once he realizes the place is corrupt and he's trying to expose something, I mean, he never resorts to having to kill people because it's just not in his nature. And he always figures out a way to disarm the situations. Even the little things where whenever he's holding a gun, he's always holding it down. He's never holding it up. And it's an indicator that he is never actually trying to inflict violence. He's trying to de-escalate at all moments. And I just think that's a really fun thing to see in this day and age, especially when we're so primed for violence in our movies and even in our culture, in our everyday lives, where people are, there's these concealed carry laws are out the window and everything else. It just feels like a very violent country and a culture. And this subverts that in a lot of ways.
I think Aaron Pierre as Terry at the center of it is so good at really just the little things. Like you mentioned, holding the gun down, you really get the sense, because he has so much discipline from his military training, that he doesn't want to hurt any. It's like he knows what he can do, and he, unlike Rambo in First Blood, who gets pushed to that point and just mows everyone down. Here, he's like, I know what I can do. I need to be disciplined enough to not let that happen, because the consequences are going to be dire. And he's so good in those big action moments of maintaining that discipline. You can see almost like an unconscious choice being made to do little things like disarm somebody's gun, or pull a bullet out of it, or when he drags the David Denman character across. There are just so many little things that you believe that Aaron Pierre went through the military and got all of this training. And it's such a powerful performance.
That scene you just mentioned where he drags him behind the cop car. I was watching something. There's a pretty funny story with that. The original plan, the plan was that they were going to put David Denby on a wire and drag him, because he's a really big guy.
Yeah.
And they just thought in the place of the scene, you don't want to exhaust Aaron Pierre. So they were going to use a wire and pull him along. But Aaron Pierre asked for one take where he could try to do it on his own. And he asked to see if he could drag him. And so he just mustered every ounce of energy that he had. And actually that scene is him actually dragging him for real, which no one really thought he could do. But he just really psyched himself up and did one take. He only do it once, but he dragged him to the back of the car. I just think it was pretty fun. So he was really into it. He really wanted to try to do as much of this as he could.
That's amazing, because when he goes in, so at the beginning, he's basically rolled by these cops, these corrupt cops, and he goes to file a criminal complaint against them in their police station. And he assumes, when he's describing the assailant, that Denman is 250 pounds. That's his assumption. And with that in mind, to see him drag him with one arm and know that he did it himself, that's like mom lifting the car off baby energy.
Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. He just felt like he wanted to try it once. He really wanted to see if he could do it, and he was able to just once though. After that, it was. But yeah, they got one good take. I really like that story. But
that's really fun. Yeah, he's such an interesting presence, because he's intimidating. He's a big guy. He's very muscular, but these policemen are also very big guys. So I don't know how much he would actually intimidate them, at least at the beginning, but you would think that he would. One of my favorite scenes, though, and something that Saulnier carries throughout both Blue Ruin and this, is just an incredible ability to build tension. And the scene where he shows up at the police station, Don Johnson comes out to confront him, and they're waiting for the router to reboot so they can see who he is.
Yeah.
It's just beautifully done.
That's a great scene.
And at the beginning of that scene, they have no intimidation going out there to confront Aaron Pierre, the Terry character.
Well, there's even this specific part where he asks if he has combat experience, and they find out that he never actually had to go overseas and serve in Iraq. And he's like, well, that's good. I was almost concerned for a minute, thinking that because he didn't go and fight, that he's basically a wimp. I love everything about the way that scene is set up.
It's such a great example of how cocky the police chief Sandy is going out into confronting the Terry character. And then you just get this reveal that you're waiting for and waiting for. They even tease it by saying the acronym about like US map or whatever. I can't remember what the acronym is, but it's like, is he a navigator?
McMap.
McMap, yeah. Yeah. And then by the end, it's like he's on the Wikipedia page for jujitsu.
He's like, I think his picture's on the page. Like, oh boy. And that's the thing too, though, because in that moment, right, you're thinking, oh man, this is about to go really poorly for these people. Yeah. But, slightly different than you expect. You really expect him to open up a can of whoop ass in that moment, something severe, but he never does. He always stays contained, does only what he has to do. And even in most of the interactions with the police, even the way that he speaks, everything about him is about trying to de-escalate a moment and trying not to do anything that's going to spur something that spins out of control. Much unlike Blue Ruin, he's always trying to make sure things do not spin out of control.
Right. That's what I think is so great about these two movies together is you have one guy who's just like reacting to things with no knowledge of like how to handle them. And then the other guy who's reacting to things with all the knowledge of how to handle them.
And even what you mentioned, he goes to the police station to do the complaint, which he knows is not in any way going to be effective. But he's not really there for that at all. He's there for two reasons. One, he's possibly trying to get the recording done, but he's also casing the police station, which is where he knows how many officers there are, like where they're going to be. He sees where the evidence locker is, so he knows where the money is. So he's there for two reasons. And that's what's good about this movie too, that you watch it the first time and you're so taken with it that you can watch it just as entertainment. The second time you watch it, you notice all the little things, all the little things that the characters are doing, which makes it even more effective because it's really well thought out.
He's so interesting because he's just so meticulous, and you just know that training is him going into a room and seeing 10 different things that nobody else would see, and just preparing and having the ability to back up that preparation in the moment. Whereas the Dwight character prepares but has no like awareness of the emotional or psychological toll of what he's preparing for. And so he's just ultimately not prepared for any of it. But I just think it's such a cool contrast, and is one of the things that makes these two films so great to throw down against one another, because they're two ends of the spectrum, like the same thing, but just very different takes on it. It's interesting with this because the budget, you never really know what a Netflix budget is, but I've seen it somewhere between 30 and 40 million. So you really get to see what Jeff Nichols can do. I'm sorry, not Jeff Nichols, what Jeremy Saulnier can do with more money. And it does feel a bit more broad than Blue Ruin, which is to be expected. It's a Netflix film. He's not Scorsese, who's going to be given a ton of money to put out The Irishman or something. He has to work in the confines of it to earn that money. And it's just, not comparing him to Christopher Nolan or anything, but you just see this great auteur with a lot of money to do what he wants to do inside this bigger machine and still put his stamp on it. And it's just really fun.
And you mentioned the budget, and like, well, where does that money go? When you think about the sequence at the end with the standoff in a way and the shootout, I mean, you have smoke bombs going off, you have all of this chaos happening, and if you watch the scene, there aren't a ton of cuts in that scene. So he's kind of shooting this stuff wide, and you have to deal with all the smoke, and you're trying to figure out where the smoke's going to go, and you're trying to get all these shots in. I think you have to stop and appreciate the difficulty of actually pulling off a sequence like that. And probably how many times it had to be reshot in order to, they might have gotten a scene, but the smoke was blocking what the take that they needed. So everything has to go right for that to work. And so I think you have to stop and appreciate that kind of filmmaking. It's not necessarily flashy and you don't see the budget, but that's really good filmmaking to have to work within that space and pull all those sequences off. And have an actor who is really assured of what he's doing as well, because all of his actions have to be precise. They have to be on time because it's all choreographed. He's taking a guy down, going under a car. You know, that sequence where he takes the one guy down, goes under the car, and then pulls the other guy's legs out from under him. Like, those things are all choreographed and have to be done within this massive chaos and smoke, and done perfectly to pull it off.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the cinematographer on this is David Gallego, who is really an indie guy. I don't know that he's done a lot of action up until this. Most recently he did On Becoming a Guinea Fowl, which is like a beautifully shot film. In contrast to Blue Ruin, which feels very artistic and intentional in its visuals because there's not a lot of dialogue in it. The cinematography on this is very capable to get those big action beats. And because the film relies so heavily on dialogue and explaining this law and the conversation between these people, I don't know that it's shot in as creative a way, but it's certainly in a competent way to handle all of those things you just said. And when you break it down and think about that's just really solid cinematography for a film on a bigger scale. Maybe not as much room to play with some of the color of the shots or, you know, what the effect is of the shots, but just really, really outstanding cinematography on this too, to do the things they did. So it's another example of kind of the trade-off, I think, of doing something for more money for a company like Netflix, where you're still making it your own, but you're surrendering some of those flourishes you might have that you can put into it when you have a little more control. But it certainly doesn't take away from this at all, because as bigger budget action films go these days, it's just so solid.
Yeah. No. So we
mentioned Don Johnson.
Was that we hadn't talked about the rest of the cast? I wanted to mention Anna Sophia Robb, who we actually did another movie. She was in the way back. So this is our second movie of hers, and she does a really good job in this movie, of being the person who has to do the heavy lifting of explaining all this stuff to you. Yeah. So, you know, it can't be understated. Like, that's a tough job as an actor. Like, you're the one that has to do the exposition and get this stuff across. And that's her role, not only in helping him, but helping us understand what the hell's going on. So, and plus, you know, with her backstory, and I think she does an excellent job in this movie.
Yeah, she's a bit of a moral center, I think. Yeah, for as disciplined as the Terry character is, I think it as far as he's pushed, it might be easier for him to spin out of control and do something he would regret if the Summer character weren't sort of keeping him grounded and helping him to understand exactly what's happening in this town. So, yeah, just great performance from her. And we mentioned Don Johnson.
Yeah. Before we get to Don Johnson, the only person I want to mention was Steve Zissou, I believe is his name. Yes. He's the guy that Elliot, who works in the office. The only reason I mention it is because there's no other time that I would be able to mention that he was in a show called Togetherness that was on HBO. It only lasted one season. That was a highly underrated show. I think that was an excellent show. It was made by the Duplass brothers, actually. And Mark Duplass stars in it with Melanie Linsky, Amanda Peet's in it, and he's the fourth person, Steve Zissou. Just a really good show about relationships and couples. I thought it was just a shame that show was canceled after one season, and I'll have no other opportunity to mention it, so I'm mentioning it now.
I like him a lot. He's a good character actor who is pretty versatile in what he does. I think he's outstanding here in the limited part that he has.
Yeah.
But also worth mentioning in those secondary characters is Emery Cohen, who plays the policeman Steve, who is just, you really root for this guy to be killed. He's so despicable.
Right.
But,
and talking about subverting your expectations, you not only expect this guy to die, you want him to suffer.
Yeah.
But it's not that kind of movie.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just as bad as you can get. I mean, he literally tries to murder Terry by throwing a gun in the truck. And that's the point where Terry recognizes that they didn't turn the lights on. And there's a little bit of exposition there about why he didn't turn the lights on that kind of sets things in motion forward. But the Emery Cohen is such a fascinating actor because you really root for his death in this film, but he's so versatile. He's in Marty Supreme. He was on Only Murders in the Building. He was on almost every episode of Smash as a completely different kind of person.
Really?
He was in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Smash?
So
I watched every episode of that show. I have no memory who that was. I have to go back and watch that then.
Yeah. So he's just so versatile as a character actor. And I didn't recognize him from anything, and I just hated him, watching this film. But going back and looking at his filmography, he's just incredibly versatile, and I want to go back and watch a bunch of his other stuff because I want to have a different perspective on this guy than what I see in Rebel Ridge because it leaves such a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
That's great writing and great acting because I mean, there's no other way to look at this guy where you might be sympathetic to Don Johnson's character, at least a little bit. There's no sympathy for the Steve character. He's just a terrible person. So, just a compelling villain from a compelling actor, I'd have to say. The only reason I wanted to bring up Don Johnson again is because he feels like he's on this Hugh Grant-esque run of playing interesting villains lately, or at least morally ambiguous characters who lean toward the dark side a little more.
Well, look, he's definitely, in his later life, he's definitely played a few really good racists. We'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I haven't had time to watch anything, but while I've been working, I've had Eastbound and Down on in the background this week.
Yeah.
And he plays Kenny Powers' dad, who's just completely terrible.
Yep. Yeah. So that helped. I mean, that's helped start almost the renaissance. So of Don Johnson. I mean, I guess Django Unchained. So he did Django Unchained and Eastbound and Down around the exact same time. So I think that really helps to start moving him into an interesting, fun place. And he starts taking all these side roles. I mean, he was in the Watchmen TV show, which he was really good in. So he was in both of those S. Craig Zahler movies. He was in Knives Out. He was really good in that. So yeah, I just think it's fun to see actors when they get into their older years and they start to get more interesting roles and see what they do.
Yeah, they go dark and get a little crankier, and it's pretty great.
But he also played the captain of the ship in Dr. Odyssey, so it's a full range.
He can do it all. He's come a long way from Sonny Crockett, that's for sure.
Really has.
The other person to talk about is David Denman, who most people know as Roy from The Office, but just a really solid everyman. Like he could play the everyman in everything, and with varying degrees of like goodness or badness, but just kind of the middle of the road guy who is always solid. Here, he starts one way and ends another way, and it's a nice little arc for him, but always serviceable, and I like seeing him in things like Peacemaker and
yeah, he's great in Peacemaker. He's actually in the 5-Star Weekend, that show that's on Peacock now that Jennifer Garner is starring in. Mm. I could lie and say,
is he like a middle of the road guy?
I don't know. Maybe he plays a husband or a boyfriend or something. I don't know. I would tell you that there's no way I would watch that, but let's be honest. The odds are I'm probably going to watch at least one episode and see how it is. What the hell?
You're going to finish it.
It's definitely not it's not necessarily my wheelhouse, but I can't resist a good Jennifer Garner show. So I'm going to give it a shot.
I feel like that kind of is your wheelhouse. like streaming TV shows with Jennifer Garner.
My wheelhouse. Well, that's fair. I did watch the last thing you told me, which was the last show she made. Maybe Jennifer Garner shows are absolutely my wheelhouse.
I think they are. Also, almost forgot to mention James Cromwell has a small but important role in this. Nice
Talk
to
about
see him
someone
being
who
cranky.
has gotten good at playing bad guys in their older age. Yeah, he's really good at playing some terrible, terrible people after he made Babe. And it's still always shocking to me because I still always think of Babe, and when I see him play someone terrible, I'm like, wow, didn't see that coming.
He's played so many bad guys that I just assume he's a cranky jerk in real life. But he in the vegan community, he's a big animal activist because of Babe. So he's by all accounts a nice guy fighting the good fight. Yet on screen, he just seems like somebody who is like, get off my lawn all the time.
Yeah.
And he has a cat, which is nice. You want to talk about anything else here before we go into the head-to-head comparison?
No, I don't want to beat this into the ground. And again, the hope is that people will go and see these movies. I don't want to spoil the movie for them, so we'll leave it there.
All right, then we'll jump into the head-to-head comparison. What do you think does a better job with its story effectiveness?
And that's a really tough question because they're both very different stories. With story effectiveness, I almost think that Blue Ruin wins just because it's a simpler story that is told. It's a pretty short movie. It really gives you everything in a condensed period of time. I think Rebel Ridge is a great story, but I just think because it's so complex in a way, it turns into something a little more complex. It's just a harder story to tell. I'm not 100% sure it's completely effective. I'm not sure everyone that watches it will really get the nuances of what's happening. And that may not be the fault of the filmmakers. It's hard to say. You make the film that you're going to make. But Blue Ruin is a very easy movie to understand. And so effectiveness is probably Blue Ruin.
I think I agree. I find Rebel Ridge to also be effective, but it also feels, like I said, it gets in the weeds a little bit. It kind of reminds me of Aaron Brockovich in a way, like someone from the outside going in to uncover this conspiracy and meeting a lot of pushback from it. That's a weird comparison, but similar stories. And I found Aaron Brockovich to get in the weeds a little bit too with all of the things that were going on when they looked at the legal aspects of it. That's kind of what happens in Rebel Ridge, I think, a little bit, at least for me as I watch it. And yeah, Blue Ruin is just so straightforward, and you can't really argue with a straight ahead revenge plot like that. And bonus points for subverting it and making it an incompetent revenge plot that that doesn't end the way you would want it to end. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna land Blue Ruin on that. What do you think about characters?
Yeah, characters. I definitely think that Rebel Ridge wins that one.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Because there's more characters that are more fully drawn. I mean, the three main characters, right. the police chief, and the two main characters who are trying to uncover the corruption. I think they're very well drawn. You get a sense of who they are, and they're all very effective characters.
Yeah, you don't go super deep on them, but you get enough to have them be fleshed out in real time for like what the situation is and to act in the way that they act. Like, you know why they would act that way. So I agree with you. I do think the Dwight character in Blue Ruin is interesting, but I don't know that he as like the main character is fully fleshed out, at least on paper. I mean, you see who he is through what he faces, but I don't know that you really get a full picture of him the way you do the Terry character or the Summer character, or even Sandy, the police chief in Rebel Ridge. So
yeah, as I said, because we don't really understand why he decided to take himself off the grid completely, and what had been going on with that. So that's why I don't think the character is fully realized it might be. But again, you're dealing with the budget that you're dealing with. I in no way think that's a negative on the movie. I mean, I still think the movie is very effectively told for less than $500,000. I mean, you can't tell everything.
Yeah. What about tone and consistency?
That's a tough one. I mean, again, is it Blue Ruin by default just because it doesn't have a lot of changing tones? Or I feel like Rebel Ridge is almost two movies.
Right.
Like we said, First Blood and Michael Clayton, which are two movies that do not go together necessarily. So just because Blue Ruin is very much a consistent one-tone movie, I mean, does it win by default? I'm leaning Blue Ruin, but I'm more than happy to go tie in this regard.
Okay. I go Blue Ruin here because it's just the same throughout, and there's no real character arc per se. I don't think there's a change in the end necessarily for the Dwight character. It feels like it feels like a car going for an hour and a half in the wrong gear, like grinding gears. Like it's consistent and unnerving and sort of bleak, and there's no real like redemption or uplifting moment in it. And you're right, Rebel Ridge is basically two films, and I think it drags a little bit in the middle because of shifting into that investigation aspect of it, and the tone changes a little more, and that makes it slightly inconsistent. But ultimately, yeah, I think that Blue Ruin is the winner here because it knows what it is. It stays the course for better or worse, and that makes it win this category for me. So I'm going to say Blue Ruin here. Do you think a tie? Is that what you want to say here?
I feel like I'm going to go tie, just because. Okay. Yeah, I think just because how much I like Rebel Ridge, I'm going to go tie.
Okay. I don't know if this one even applies, but cultural staying power, it's tough to say.
It is tough to say. I mean, Rebel Ridge would have to win by default just because it's a Netflix movie and it's readily accessible. I don't think a lot of people are aware of Blue Ruin, unfortunately.
Well, what's interesting is that Blue Ruin is very highly regarded among a certain subset of people. So it's not broad in the same way that Rebel Ridge is, but the people who know it love it. So that almost like cancels out the broad appeal of Rebel Ridge for me, because I don't know specifically how many people have seen it or how buried it is on Netflix amongst 10,000 other movies. But I do know that the people who have seen it, at least from the critical aspect and like on Letterboxd and stuff, really love it. So I think I'm going to call this one a tie, just because I know that smaller group of people is very devout to Blue Ruin, and at least in that subculture, it has a lot of staying power. But Rebel Ridge, just because it's a Netflix film, like you said, has a broader appeal. And to me, that's kind of like balances the scale a little bit. So I'm going to say tie there. And yeah, I mean, we're looking back over the head to head, we're pretty much the same. You picked Blue Ruin, or I picked Blue Ruin over tone and consistency, where you said a tie, and you picked Rebel Ridge, where I said a tie in cultural staying power. So it's neck and neck. I'm Blue Ruin and you're Rebel Ridge so far, which I think is interesting. Let's do our 5 questions. These are the questions we ask that won't necessarily have a bearing on anything we vote on, but are still fun to ask. So which film is more rewatchable for you?
Rebel Ridge is more rewatchable. I mean, this is the fact that I've actually watched it multiple times in the past couple of weeks. So
yeah. fair enough.
I mean, Blue Ruin is it. I mean, Blue Ruin is an excellent movie. It's a hard movie to watch. I mean, like you talked about, we're talking about If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You before. I mean, Blue Ruin is in a similar vein to that in some ways, where it's uncomfortable, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I would certainly rewatch it. And if there were a Blu-ray or 4K edition available, I would buy it. It's hard to come by. Rebel Ridge, because it's Netflix, obviously doesn't have a physical media release, much to my chagrin. But I think you're right. Even though I feel Rebel Ridge is longer and lulls a bit in the middle, it still has movement to it in a way that's more palatable than Blue Ruin. So yeah, I think we're in agreement there. You hanging out with anybody from either of these films? You going target shooting with Dwight?
Man, hanging out with anybody from these movies. I don't think I'm hanging out with anybody from Blue Ruin. I'm sorry, I just don't. It's not my jam. And Rebel Ridge, I mean, wouldn't everybody want to hang out with Terry? But I don't think Terry would want to hang out with me. But I feel like I would hang out with Terry.
Yeah, I agree exactly. I think Terry would like tolerate you for a while. You meaning anybody, but I don't know if you would want to hang out with anyone. Seems like sort of a solitary dude. I'm interested in what that life was like owning a part of a restaurant for Terry before the events of this film.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. There's no place to mention this, but I really liked the part with the Chinese food restaurant subplot. But what I really liked was, and this is a little detail, the guy that he talks to that takes the phone calls from the Chinese restaurant, like he puts on an accent when he's talking to customers. But that's not really how he talks. Like, I love that little detail. I just like that's something I didn't catch until I watched it like the third time. And I was like, oh, wait a second. I was like, okay.
Yeah. It's like, oh, what's up, T?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, yeah. I don't think I'm hanging out with anybody. I try to hang out with Terry, but I don't know if you'd want to hang out with me.
I mean, I might.
Career peak or valley for anybody?
I don't think so. I don't think it's, I mean, hopefully it's not a career peak for Aaron Pierre. I mean, we can hope that there's more than that. But, I mean, yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of gone on to do other things and hopefully you have a long career. So I don't know if I would say that it's career peak for anybody or valley.
I agree. A lot more from all of the people involved, I think. All right. Which one is Spielberg directing?
Wow. Yeah, he's got to direct Rebel Ridge. I mean, Steven Spielberg is not going to direct a movie for $500,000. I mean, that whole movie is not his wheelhouse.
Yeah. It feels a little bit like Rebel Ridge with its explosions and its action scenes is like the movie the Spielberg stand-in creates in The Fabelmans when he's a kid. So it almost seems like he's already made it in a way. I don't know. But it tells you that he's more inclined to make something like that. Would he do a good job of it? I don't know. But I think he could do it. Yeah. But I think it's so singular to Saulnier, even though it's a broader film. I think what he brings to it is something that another director couldn't bring to it.
I agree.
As like nebulous as those things might be. All right. This is an interesting thought experiment. Would either film be better if you swapped lead actors?
No, not at all.
You can't see Macon Blair being that disciplined and fighting the police. Yeah, and at the same time, you cannot buy Aaron Pierre being incompetent after you've seen Rebel Ridge, right?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, there's not even any discussion needed. Just no.
Yeah. All right, those are our 5 questions. Let's move on to our online polling results. Follow us on social media, Movie Throwdown Pod everywhere, and cast your vote for the winner each week. We put polls up several times throughout the week. Moderate voting this week. Where do you think it landed with the internet people?
I mean, I've got to say Rebel Ridge just because it's on Netflix and people probably have heard of it at least.
Overwhelmingly in favor of Rebel Ridge, 8-42, which is a little surprising to me because the Instagram account, at least, is followed by other movie people. You know, it's not, it's our followers and the people we follow are cinephiles, you know? So I'm surprised that they would lean Rebel Ridge in such a disparity of voting. But YouTube is where the majority of voting happened this week. And I guess YouTubers are more populist Netflix watchers.
And look, at the end of the day, let's be honest. I mean, Blue Ruin is definitely a movie that appeals to certain cinephiles. But look, Rebel Ridge to me is a better movie. It's you can see the money on the screen. The performances are really powerful. It's a director really in charge of his craft. I do think, for all accounts, the only knock against it is possibly it's a little hard to follow, maybe, but it is a better movie. It just is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, with that in mind, we've talked through it, and it seems like, based on our answers in the head-to-head comparison, that you're Team Rebel Ridge and I'm Team Blue Ruin. So, factoring everything in, where do you land with the better film this week?
I just said it. I guess I spoiled it because I just said it is the better movie. It is a better movie as far as I'm concerned. So Rebel Ridge is the winner for me.
I am still undecided. I'm going to have to just go with my gut here because there's such a case for both of them. When I think about it as this was a matchup of Jeremy Saulnier films, and I think in looking at him as a director, an incredible calling card with Blue Ruin. It toured festivals, it won awards, people love it who are in the know. But in seeing what he did with that and going into the lion's den of Netflix and creating something that's appealing to everyone while keeping the sensibilities that you see in Blue Ruin, I think I'm talking myself into agreeing with you that it's going to be Rebel Ridge because it's a waypoint in his career that I think is indicative of taking those skills from early on and adapting them. And I think it's not the end. So it shows a lot of growth as a director. And yeah, I'm with you. And it's unanimous this week. You and I and the internet all agree that Rebel Ridge is the better Jeremy Saulnier film of the two. So it's nice for us to be on the same page with everyone for once. So that's it for this week's episode. Rebel Ridge is our crowning champion. Next week is going to be kind of fun. We're switching gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about two films. I don't know quite how to put these into like a small descriptor that sums them both up, but basically they're two films about unsuspecting victims led into death cult scenarios, which is a fascinating way to go about it, I think. But from 2015, The Invitation is going to go up against The Menu from 2022. Both very different films in tone and substance, but it does have that underlying similarity that I think is going to be a lot of fun to talk about. So do come back and join us for that. It's going to be The Invitation going against The Menu. And in the meantime, tell us which one you think is better on social media. We're Movie Throwdown Pod everywhere. Look for our polls and cast your vote, and we'll read the results on the show. Also, if you want to leave us a note, we're moviethrowdownpod@gmail.com. Tell us what you think of the show, what works, what doesn't. We're always open to feedback. So thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you next week. So long.